plastic plant pots I've had for years. I've reused them again and again and again. They're pretty good quality. They actually go in a tray, which later in the season I'll have them all set up in a tray so that they can grow on in the greenhouse. This is just a plastic container that something came in, I think grapes or something, and you can use these too. You can use a lot of recycled materials for growing your plants in, and it's perfectly fine. Just make sure that it's well cleaned out and that there's no food gunk or anything in there that could rot or hold pathogens. So we're just gonna fill these up. So I've got 4 of these sitting here. So 4 varieties are gonna go into the pots. And normally I would have just used a 5th, but I want to show you how growing them in a tray is like as well. And I'll come back to this as they're growing and then pot them up, etc. And I've decided that I'm going to broadcast sow this with quite a few tomato seeds, and then any of the extras I'm going to pass on. So I'll put it up on Facebook or within our allotment group that I've got some tomato seedlings if anyone wants them. Inside these pots, there is a little rim just down from the lip. And I've put the compost in up to that point, and that's plenty of space to put the seeds in and cover them, etc. So I've got my 4 little pots here ready to go, and I've got my tray in the back. And I think that I'm going to sow the big, beefy red ones, the ones that I can barely pronounce, the Costo Luto Florentino. I think that's the one that I'm going to grow quite a lot of. So let's have a look at these seeds. They're tiny little things. And saving tomato seeds, that's something you can do as well, and it's dead easy. A lot of people will try to ferment the tomato seeds, and if you want them dry like this and single in how they are stored, then that's the way to go. But there's an easier way as well, and that is really just scraping the seeds off from inside a tomato onto a paper towel and then drying it and using it. And I have a piece on how you can do that over on my website as well. And it's so easy. So in this tray, I'm just going to try to space these out a little bit, but it's not always doable because they are tiny little things. And each one of these is likely to come up as a little seedling. So the furthest you can get them apart, the easier it'll be for the next stage. So pricking these out and planting them on into their own pots later on. Now, it's just the lightest covering of compost. And I think that the recommendation is something ridiculous like 1.5 millimeters. It's just a very light covering. So you keep those on the surface there and you just barely sprinkle compost over the top. How do you say compost? I alternate and say compost and compost. Here on the Isle of Man it's compost, and I get corrected all the time. Let me know as a comment below, what's the proper way to say compost? Now on to these 4 little pots. And before we get to sewing them up, I want to show you something. This is a type of biodegradable plant pot that I just got from my local garden center. And it feels like it's a mixture of paper and some other type of fiber in there. It's heavy duty, and these are designed to last long enough for you to be able to plant your plants out. But eventually they will biodegrade, and these are a great plastic-free option. If you're like me and you have plastic plant pots already, and I've had these for years, keep them. Don't throw them out. Use them until they don't have a life anymore, they're cracked and just unusable, and then throw them out. There's no point in wasting plastic if you have it already. And the same goes for any kind of plastic trays that you might get with veg from the supermarket. Keep it, because that will save you money and will give it a second life as well. Back to sewing up these plant pots. The point of actually sowing seeds in these pots that they're going to live in for quite a long time is that I really only want one plant living in here by the end. So I'm just really going to be sowing these with a few seeds each and then thinning them out afterwards. So it's not like I had that tray of seedlings or seeds that will eventually become a tray of seedlings. These will just have a few little plants coming out eventually. And that way it conserves seeds. Tomato seeds have quite a long shelf life and I can keep them from year to year, or I can give them to people who want to grow tomatoes at the next seed swap, which is just a month away. So first of all, I'm going to sow these sun gold, and there are literally only 8 seeds in here. You can barely see them at the bottom. So I'm going to just get 3 out. Perfect. There's 3 in my hand. And then I'm going to put them in this little module or this pot, space them out really well. The next step is giving your seeds a drink of water. They're not going to grow if they don't have any moisture, but you have got to be careful about how you water them. So if you have a typical watering can that comes out in a stream, you don't want to use that because it'll disturb the surface of the soil. It's much better to use one of those rose-headed watering cans if you've got one of those, or a spray bottle like I'm using. And these give an actual really fine mist of moisture rather than a directional stream. So just be careful, because if you disturb the surface, you might disturb the seeds and the seedlings as they're growing, and it might lead to some of them, or maybe all of them, not growing properly. So I've got the name of the tomato here on the label, and I'm just going to stick it in so I don't forget what it is. Now with the plant label, and that guy can go here in the front as well. I'm using this little baby spray bottle, but you can get much bigger ones. So I think 1.5 liters up to 5 liters, and they come in really handy in a greenhouse or polytunnel situation. And you can get a lot of seedlings watered in no time with that. For me, for these few pots, this is perfectly fine. And if it's the same for you in your situation, just use what you have. Save money. Gardening can be expensive. So we're over here at the window now, and I want to show you my latest gardening gadgets. This is an electric plant propagator, and it literally plugs into the wall and it provides bottom heat to any of the plants or seedlings that are growing inside here. So this is the base unit, and then there are 3 different trays that fit inside. They all come out and they're composed of a base here, and they have a lid. And on the lid, there's a little vent here, so that releases any kind of condensation or heat. You can also take this off completely if you notice that your seedlings are a bit too wet, to allow them to dry out, but this helps to keep them nice and warm. Tomato seedlings need to be kept at a constant temperature, so they need to be between 64 to 69 degrees Fahrenheit for them to germinate. So for those little seeds to sprout up and say hello and start doing their thing. And so this is going to keep them toasty warm. You can also kind of create a similar situation if you're very careful above a radiator, well away from a radiator, or in my case in the past, I always had a conservatory. In the new house, I don't have that luxury. A conservatory is like a sunroom, and it's at a constant temperature pretty much all the year round. So this is my solution for this year. Now, as far as temperature is concerned, these can be very inaccurate, I've heard. This is my first year ever using one. So they tend to come with basically temperature gauges on them, like thermostats, but I'm going to use my digital temperature gun. It works like that, so you just point and it tells me what the surface temperature of anything is. I use this in soap making. So that's going to be my workaround for the temperature thing. And as far as light is concerned, plants need light, and although this gets a decent amount of light, it's not going to be enough in the long run. It's going to be fine for the germination stage, but later on they're going to have to go under a grow light. I want to show you another option as well. This is a non-electric plant propagator. So if you have a warm area, so the conservatory or above a radiator or a sunny room, you can use this, and it is basically just a tray. This one has drainage holes in it, so it would need a base unit, and then a lid that mimics a little greenhouse, and this keeps the plants warm inside, and this can work as well. These will be used later on in the year for when I'm germinating seeds outside and in the greenhouse as well, to a certain extent, if it's not too warm in there already. But these do come in handy, especially if you want to keep plants warm overnight as well. So in the greenhouse, you might, during the day, have this uncovered, but at night, for extra protection, you can put this on as well. And as I said before, it's going to be 1 to 2 weeks before I see any signs of life out of these guys. But don't worry, I have planned another video, and these guys, especially here in the center, I'm going to show you how to prick out tomato seedlings. And that's going to be, I imagine, in about 5 weeks time, 5 or 6 weeks. We'll see how these guys do. But what I'm really interested in right now is knowing whether or not you've sown your tomato seeds yet, what varieties, and also what your last or your safe frost date is. I'm really curious because I imagine that there are people in Scandinavia and Alaska and other parts of the world who have a very late frost date, the safe date at least. So let me know as a comment down below. And also, please like this video if you enjoyed it and you found it helpful and useful. And I will be back next week with another video, and hopefully if this weather lets up, we're gonna be back outside because there is plenty to do as always. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you then. Bye for now.